There it goes. Is it recording now? Yeah. Yes, it is recording now. Very good. So I'm sorry. So this, I'm glad you caught that. Thank you. Did you start your little button thing?
Yeah, I did.
You did. All right. So this is a plan of Saqqara, and you can get an idea of just the fact that there's a lot of temples and dooms. Temples and doom. Yes. Where's Angelina Jolie? Sorry. There are a lot of temples. What?
Indiana Jones.
Oh, it's Indiana Jones. I'm sorry. I prefer to talk about Angelina Jolie. Tomb Raider. Wrong one. Thank you for the correction there, Mr. Marine. Anyway, so this is a plan. You can see that there are a lot of tombs and a lot of temples here. Okay? So you can understand where this becomes a necropolis, a city of the dead. All right? So, but we started talking out about something called a mastaba. And it's not moving, so let's see what happens if I push this button. There it goes. So this is kind of imagine if these were really little small things, right? So like when in my house I've got these little step stools and they kind of look like that, right? But they're not, these are bigger. But you can understand where it's like, okay, it's like a little bench. And so this is, kind of a sectional view of the mastaba showing the tunnel that goes down and the chamber where the person's buried down at the bottom. This next image shows a little bit of a different sort of view of it. It shows the underground burial chambers and the blockages that they would put in there to protect the riches that were down there. It also shows the statue up in the upper chamber, and it shows where there would be a chapel. Okay, I don't know if chapel's the right word. I guess it's a place of worship or something. So the intent of these things was that they would not just be like, okay, well, it's a tomb and a graveyard, and we buried the guy and we're done, right? The intent was that it would have continued use. Okay, so here's a picture of a sort of a restored mastaba in Egypt. Okay, and you kind of get an idea. It looks like a little sort of bench of stone or brick. Okay, but the mastaba led to a very interesting transformation. Okay, and so this is an important part because this is one of the few places where we see this progression of architecture. We see this progression and development of an idea. So we have these little blocky looking buildings, and along comes a guy named Zoser. Oops, sorry, went the wrong way. Zoser, and I believe it is spelled D-J-O-S-E-R in some references. Okay, and Zoser wants to be like the shiznits, right? In death. And so he sets out to create a bigger mastaba. Okay? So let's take a look at some of the facts of Zoser. So he takes on this notion along with the first architect in recorded history, Imhotep, something like that. And they set out to transform this little mastaba block into a much bigger thing. Okay, so it was enlarged over a sequence of times, right? And then after it got so big at the bottom, they started stacking it up. So anyway, so you see this progression, and it enlarges to this pyramid that ends up over 200 feet high, the tallest building in the world at the time. And it's made from these gigantic blocks of stone. So one of the things that's interesting about it is that it's the first time in recorded history, so this predates all of the column-like forms that we saw in Mesopotamia. So remember, early Mesopotamia, there were these thick walls and these little tiny rooms because they couldn't span very far, right? Mm-hmm. All right. Then we started to see later during the Persian Empire and the Syrian Empire where they started to be able to span further and started to use columns. This predates all of that stuff. This is way the heck back. So you're in this area that he develops, right, where the Pyramid of Zoser is. We see the first columnar forms, the monumental columns. Okay? We start to see column capitals become kind of this focal point of the things, and we see this relationship to natural forms, namely the papyrus plant. We start to see the use of symbolic content, right? The pyramid becomes this stairway to heaven. No, we're not referencing Led Zeppelin. Okay? Okay, so here's a couple of plans of what we're going to call the mortuary complex, okay, of Zoser. And you can see that, hey, this is not just a mastaba, right? There are multiple mastabas. There's one down below and one up above. There is an entire sort of walled, almost like a walled city of the dead with all of these different buildings and stuff in it that he developed. And then there's this thing that never existed before, which is this gigantic pyramid. Okay? Yes, sir?
Do you think he put the mastabas around the pyramid to kind of show off the difference between the two?
I'm not sure if it was for that, or if one of the mastabas was intended to be used for the mummification in process. It's pretty gross. In doing research for this presentation, I looked at some stuff that was like, oh geez. Like they used to take, after the person died, they would take this little wire thing and they would shove it through his nose up into the brain, and they'd twist it to liquefy the brain to get the brain out of the skull.
From the nose.
Through the nose.
Oh.
Yeah, there's some gross stuff.
Hey,
So,
shut up.
all right, so we're going to stop there. We're going to continue, get back to architecture and leave that human body stuff alone. Okay? It is gross. So you guys want to look at it, you can find it. Look up, mummification process in ancient Egypt. Okay, sorry, but you guys can see in both of these places that there are houses and there are these buildings that have been placed there. It's called a Hebshed here. Hebsed, not shed. And that deals with a ritual festival that would occur. But there were all these buildings that were built because the idea was that Zoser was a god, and that this was going to be his house in the afterlife, and that he wanted to have all of these different things. Okay, he had to have administrative facilities, he had to have houses and a variety, he had to have a temple so that he could be worshipped. One of the interesting things that you guys can look at is this thing right here that's called the Serdab, right? And there's actually this little room, right, with a little window, and there's a gigantic statue of Zoser inside the room staring out of the window. Yeah, trippy. Yep. Okay, so here's a three-dimensional view, and now you can start to get an idea of the fact that this walled thing was huge. It had something like 15 gates, but only one of the gates actually let you into the complex. Yes, so look up here. Is that a gate?
Yes.
Is that a gate?
Yes.
Is that a gate?
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of them, but only one of them led in. It was this one right here.
Why?
I would guess it was to try to trick.
Oh.
Well, no. Let me rephrase that. It's not. I did read about that. One theory is that each of those gates would allow the spirit of Zoser to go out to different precincts of his empire or of Egypt, to different cities and stuff. That was the one idea. Okay, but you can see that area over here is elevated. So look how tall the wall is. The wall is huge, right? And this area that's over here is elevated up and it's filled. And then it steps down and is still filled. And there's the lower court down in here. And there's another court at the other end with the exit, which doesn't lead to anywhere, or it's a fountain. Okay? So we talked about the fact that he wanted to create a giant mastaba. Bigger, better. All right, so right here we have some drawings that give you an idea of that. So the one over here shows the original mastaba and then what became this stairway to heaven, this pyramid. Okay, the first ever pyramid. And then the drawing over on the left shows you the original mastaba, the second mastaba, the third mastaba, the first pyramid, and finally the second pyramid, as well as all the stuff that is going on underground. That's some crazy stuff, right? Look at all those passages under there. So, all right. Here we see an actual picture of the pyramid, and you see part of the buildings that were constructed inside of the complex. So if I back it up for just a moment, right, to that, you can start to see the pyramid, and you see these little sort of vaulted structures that are, let me try and get my cursor over here. Can't see. See these little vaulted structures right in here? So when we go forward to this slide, that is what you're looking at. Okay, so this is actually inside of the walls. Okay? All right, another picture of the same thing a little bit further off. And this next image shows something unique. It shows these columns that are embedded into a wall. And it's the first time that we find this condition being used in a symbolic way. Do you need columns there?
Nope.
No.
There's a wall, a big bearing wall, made of rock. You don't need columns there, but the columns were placed there as symbolic elements. Okay? The next image, and actually you can find pictures of the ruins of this. This is the entrance. You know, I told you there was only one gateway that actually worked. So you entered, you went to the gateway and you went to this little short hallway that was only this wide, 3 feet. And then you entered into this colonnaded area and you walked through it. So I'll back up real quick to that plan. Okay, let me back up even further. So here is, there it is. Okay, here is that entrance right here. And here's the colonnade that leads into the south court. Okay? So, back to where we were, which is about right here. So that's what that looked like, and there's actually images of it. One of the things that I want you guys to note about this is, these are columns, right? Columns are typically used to hold something up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these columns aren't just columns. They're attached to walls, like wing walls, that come out to the column. Technically, you don't need a column there, right? All you have is these, look at the repetitive walls here. There's a wall here and a wall here, and every one of these columns had a wall coming out to it, like a fin. So really, the column doesn't need to be there. The column's been placed there because we're trying to get it to create this symbolic row of these sort of papyrus pieces that are going up. Okay? All right, continuing on. So let's take a look at Lower Egypt, okay? So, and actually, one of the things that's out of order here is that Saqqara is in Lower Egypt, so probably should have looked at Lower Egypt before we got to the pyramid, but I couldn't decide whether we were going to talk about the creation of this pyramid or talk about Egypt in a geographical location kind of thing. How are we doing on time there, buddy?
You have 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes, all right. So, again, these are 2 kind of close-ups of Lower Egypt down by the Mediterranean. Again, take a look at the cities. There's the city of Memphis. If you remember, Memphis was actually a civilization, or it was a prehistoric city, right? That was one of the ones that was in the very first early slides. Memphis was one of the cities. And so you can see that Saqqara is directly across from it, all right? So, continuing on.
Actually, I should stop it.
I should stop. How many minutes are we at?
No, you have 36 seconds.
Oh, all right. So that's to 14 minutes, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, 14 minutes.
All right. I better stop it.